I turned down a friend/colleague and things were fine, until they suddenly weren't. Hi. Let me set the stage. I'm a 22-year-old woman, and for the past year, I've worked alongside a colleague, let's call him K, a 25-year-old man. Our professional paths crossed when he joined my workplace, and despite some initial distance, we naturally found ourselves becoming part of the same social circle. To make things more interesting, Kay left the company briefly but later returned, which made his re-entry feel like picking up a book where the story had paused. Over time, we built a casual friendship. It wasn't the kind that carried deep emotional weight or frequent one-on-one interactions, but it was friendly and comfortable. We hung out with others in a wider group of friends, a lively and diverse mix of individuals aged 22 to 31. These friendships formed organically, a testament to the easy camaraderie of like-minded people working together and sharing milestones. Together, we celebrated birthdays, marked achievements, and navigated the ebbs and flows of life. Within this group, we found an unspoken agreement that our differences enriched us rather than divided us. No two of us were the same, and yet we fit together like the pieces of a colorful mosaic. At work, I happen to be the youngest in this eclectic group, and though I hold the position of supervisor, the title rarely interferes with our camaraderie. The workplace culture is relaxed, fostering mutual respect rather than rigid hierarchies. It's the kind of environment where age is just a number, and the dynamics are more about connection than authority. Despite my role, I never felt out of place among my older colleagues, and our friendships continued to flourish outside the confines of the office. Then, a few months ago, something unexpected happened. Our mutual friends began to drop hints that Kay might have developed feelings for me. At first, I brushed it off, dismissing their observations as playful gossip. I'm not the best at picking up on subtle cues or reading between the lines, and nothing in Kay's behavior had suggested anything romantic. He hadn't made an effort to deepen our friendship beyond the surface level, and we had never shared private moments or heartfelt conversations that could hint at something more. To me, he was just another friendly face in the group. But as the whispers grew louder, I started to notice the way our friends would exchange knowing glances when Kay and I interacted. They shared stories of how he mentioned me in passing, little, seemingly inconsequential remarks that painted the picture of someone smitten from afar. According to them, his fondness for me was evident, even if he had never mustered the courage to say it outright. When they described it, the infatuation sounded quaint, almost sweet, like a shy boy harboring a schoolyard crush. Still, I couldn't quite reconcile their words with my reality. Kay had always been cordial but distant, like a leaf floating on the periphery of my awareness. If he harbored these feelings, they existed in a world separate from the one I knew. It was strange to think about how someone could hold you in such high regard without ever making the effort to truly know you. In some ways, the revelation felt hollow, like a gift wrapped in beautiful paper but empty inside. At the time, I didn't feel the need to change anything. Kay hadn't approached me directly, and his alleged feelings were just that, alleged. Without confirmation, I decided the best course of action was to maintain the status quo. Our interactions remained polite and friendly, just as they had always been. I saw no reason to alter the dynamics of our friendship based on speculation, even if it did linger in the back of my mind. Looking back, I wonder if I was too dismissive or naive, but in the moment, it all seemed so inconsequential. Life went on, work remained steady, and our friend group continued to thrive. The idea that something could disrupt this harmony felt like a distant possibility, a scenario that existed only in the realm of what if. Little did I know, the calm was merely the prelude to a storm I never saw coming. After learning from our mutual friends about K's feelings, I decided to keep things as they were. It wasn't that I didn't care, I did, but I believed in respecting his boundaries. If he wasn't ready to share how he felt, then it wasn't my place to confront him. To me, our friendship felt normal, untouched by the revelation, and I wanted to keep it that way. I didn't want to risk creating awkwardness or misunderstandings that could disrupt the easy dynamic we had established. So, I didn't change a thing. Our group hangouts continued as usual, and I treated Kay the same as I always had, friendly, polite, and approachable. I saw no reason to act differently, especially since he hadn't expressed his feelings directly. If anything, I thought my decision to carry on as usual was a way of showing respect, of giving him the space to address his emotions on his own terms. For a while, it seemed like everything was fine. Then, one night about 2 months ago, things shifted. We had all been out together, laughing and chatting as we usually did. The evening felt warm and familiar, the kind of night that reminded me why I cherished this group so much. But as the group dispersed and we all headed our separate ways, Kay offered to walk me home. It wasn't unusual, our group often looked out for each other like that, so I accepted without giving it much thought. The streets were quiet as we walked, the air filled with the faint hum of distant cars and the rhythmic sound of our footsteps. At first, the conversation was casual. We talked about work, shared a few jokes, and commented on the night's events. But as we got closer to my apartment, his tone shifted. There was a nervousness to his voice, a hesitation that made me glance at him more than once. Finally, as we reached the corner near my building, he stopped walking and turned to face me. "Are you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. The question caught me off guard. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied, confused. "Why?" He hesitated, his hands fidgeting slightly at his sides. I feel like you've been avoiding me," he said, his voice quieter now. "Or maybe you're upset with me. Have I done something wrong?" I blinked, genuinely surprised. "No, not at all," I said quickly. "I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. I've just been dealing with a lot of stress work, personal stuff. It's nothing to do with you." His shoulders relaxed slightly, but the tension in his eyes didn't entirely fade. He nodded, as if trying to process my words, but then he said something that made my heart skip a beat. "Okay," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "Well, I thought you were avoiding me because I love you." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The streetlights cast a faint glow around us, and the distant sounds of the city faded into silence. I stared at him, stunned, unsure of what to say. His words hung in the air between us, fragile and raw, as if they might shatter if I reacted too strongly. "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't that I doubted his sincerity, it was clear that he meant what he said, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. Why me? What was it about me that made him feel this way? His answer was as unexpected as his confession. "You are the cutest creature on earth," he said simply, his eyes meeting mine with an earnestness that was almost childlike. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. On one hand, his words were sweet in their simplicity, a reflection of his effort to express feelings that probably overwhelmed him. On the other hand, they felt superficial, like a compliment plucked from the air rather than a heartfelt expression of why he cared about me as a person. It's worth noting that English isn't K's first language, and I tried to remind myself of that. Perhaps his choice of words was limited, or maybe he struggled to articulate his feelings in a way that captured their depth. Still, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. His confession, while genuine, felt like it was based on an idealized version of me rather than the person I truly was. He must have sensed my hesitation because he quickly added, "You don't have to say the same back." "It's okay." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Kay," I began gently, "I care about you a lot as a friend. You're special to me, and I value our friendship so much. But I don't feel the same way romantically." He nodded, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I worried that I had hurt him, that my honesty had driven a wedge between us. But then he smiled a small, sad smile and said, "Thank you for telling me." The walk home after that was quiet, but not unbearably so. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a fragile peace that I hoped would allow us to move forward. In the days that followed, things were a little awkward, as I expected they might be, but eventually, we fell back into our normal rhythm. Or so I thought. I didn't realize it then, but that night marked the beginning of a shift subtle at first, like the faintest tremor before an earthquake. What had seemed fine on the surface would soon reveal itself to be anything but. After K's confession, there was an inevitable awkwardness that hung over us like a low cloud. For the first few days, every interaction felt slightly strained, as if we were both trying too hard to pretend nothing had changed. I tried to be mindful of his feelings without letting it affect our work or our friendship too much. Slowly but surely, we slipped back into a semblance of normalcy. I thought we had reached a good place, a place where his feelings had been acknowledged, my stance had been clear, and we could both move forward without too much damage to our dynamic. For a while, everything seemed fine. Our interactions felt natural again, and I let myself believe that the bump in the road was behind us. I didn't anticipate how quickly things would unravel. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. About 2 weeks ago, K's demeanor began to change. At first, it was small things. His tone when addressing me seemed colder, his responses shorter. I chalked it up to a bad mood or personal stress. After all, we all have bad days. But as the days passed, his behavior grew more pointed, more deliberate. He became visibly irritated whenever I spoke to him, whether it was during work or in our social group. His irritation quickly escalated to outright hostility. At work, his disrespect for me as his supervisor became impossible to ignore. He would deliberately ignore my requests, roll his eyes when I gave instructions, or dismiss my input altogether. Stonewalling became his default response, and worse, he started to undermine my authority by openly telling me what to do. It felt surreal. Here I was, in a role where I was expected to lead, only to find myself being treated with blatant disregard by someone who was supposed to be my subordinate. I pride myself on being polite and approachable at work, even in moments of stress. I'm not the type to raise my voice or snap at people. My approach is firm yet fair, assertive when necessary, but never excessive. Yet with K, I found myself constantly on edge, having to navigate his unpredictable moods and outright defiance. On several occasions, I had to step in and remind him of my role, not because I wanted to assert dominance, but because his behavior was actively disrupting the workflow. Each time I did, he would meet me with a look of disdain that cut deeper than I cared to admit. What made it worse was the personal nature of his attacks. He began to vent his frustrations to our mutual friends, painting me in a light that was both unfair and hurtful. According to one of our friends, K had labeled me a narcissist coward, accusing me of actions that were, in his words, irreparable. When I heard those words, I felt a sharp pang of disbelief. How had we gone from an awkward but honest conversation to this level of animosity? What had I done to deserve such venom? I tried to piece it together, analyzing every interaction, every decision, every word I had spoken. I couldn't find the answer. I couldn't understand why someone who once claimed to love me would now seem so determined to tear me down. Adding to the confusion was his behavior in our group chat. As a group, we often shared memes and jokes, many of them poking fun at ourselves. One running joke was about our collective inability to show up on time for anything. I would occasionally send memes about being late or drinking, harmless, light-hearted fun that everyone seemed to enjoy. Everyone except K. On 3 separate occasions, he left the group chat immediately after I posted one of these memes. At first, I didn't think much of it. K had always been a bit temperamental, and I assumed it was unrelated. But now, looking back, I wondered if he was misinterpreting my humor as something personal, something directed at him. Our mutual friends shared their perception of the situation, suggesting that K might be stuck in the anger phase of processing his feelings. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps K was lashing out because he didn't know how to handle rejection. But even understanding that possibility didn't make it hurt any less. His behavior had crossed a line, affecting not only our friendship but also the professional environment we shared. It wasn't just me who noticed the change. Other colleagues began to comment on his unprofessionalism, his short temper, and his growing hostility. Some even confided that they felt uncomfortable around him, his anger creating a tension that rippled through the workplace. Eventually, his behavior escalated to the point where my colleagues felt compelled to issue a disciplinary meeting, an action they took on their own accord, without any prompting from me. While part of me felt validated that others saw what I was dealing with, another part of me felt an overwhelming sadness. This wasn't the Kay I thought I knew. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped for resolution. I wanted to believe that Kay and I could have an honest conversation, that we could address whatever was fueling his anger and find a way to move past it. But Kay didn't seem interested in reconciliation. Instead, he chose to deflect blame, painting himself as the victim while casting me as the villain. The narrative he spun was one where I was cold and heartless, where my actions were the sole reason for his misery. It felt unfair, especially when I had done my best to handle the situation with kindness and respect. The worst part was the loss. Kay and I had never been particularly close, but we had shared moments of friendship, moments that now felt tainted by his bitterness. It hurt to see someone I once considered a friend become so nasty, so unrecognizable. It hurt even more to know that he was actively trying to turn our friends against me. Thankfully, most of them saw through his behavior, recognizing that his hostility wasn't limited to me. But the damage was done. The dynamic of our group had shifted, the easy camaraderie replaced by an undercurrent of tension. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know if it was worth fixing. As much as I wanted to mend things, I couldn't ignore the way Kay had treated me, the way he had disrespected me not only as a friend but also as a professional. I couldn't help but feel that a true friend would have come to me directly, would have been willing to have a conversation instead of letting resentment fester and grow. Maybe he was taking everything personally. Maybe it was all a big misunderstanding. Or maybe it was something deeper, something I couldn't fully grasp. All I knew was that the situation had reached a breaking point, and I felt lost, hurt, and overwhelmed. I wish I could say that this situation only felt like a small blip in the grander scheme of my life, but the truth is, it's weighed on me more than I ever anticipated. As much as I've tried to compartmentalize everything, my personal stress, my responsibilities at work, and now this tension with Kay, everything seems to bleed together. It's as if each piece of stress is stacking on top of the other, and now I find myself teetering under the weight of it all. I've always considered myself a resilient person, someone who could weather most storms with grace, but this feels different. It feels personal. It feels like a betrayal. To make matters worse, I've been dealing with so many other personal challenges that my mental health is already fragile. This conflict with Kay, something I initially believed we could handle with maturity and understanding, has become the final straw. It's not just about the frustration of being disrespected or the pain of losing a friendship. It's the utter confusion of not knowing why it has come to this. The more I reflect, the less it all makes sense. How does someone go from confessing love to harboring such intense anger in such a short span of time? What's particularly difficult is that Kay's behavior at work has become so disruptive that my colleagues took it upon themselves to initiate disciplinary action. I had nothing to do with their decision. It wasn't my call, but the fact that others felt compelled to intervene speaks volumes. He hasn't just been cold and uncooperative with me. He's been dismissive and rude to others as well. It's almost as if his anger has consumed him entirely, leaving no room for professionalism or courtesy. I don't know how to reconcile the person he was with the person he's become. The most baffling part of all of this is that Kay apparently feels he is the one owed an apology. One of our mutual friends told me he wants an apology and distance, as if I'm the one who wronged him. But how can I apologize when I don't even know what I've supposedly done? I've tried to approach this situation with as much empathy as I can muster, considering how difficult rejection must have been for him. But empathy doesn't mean accepting blame for something I didn't do. His refusal to take accountability for his behavior leaves me at a loss. I've tried to be understanding, patient, and kind, but it seems none of that has mattered to him. It's not just me who has noticed his behavior. Our other friends and even new colleagues have approached me, expressing their discomfort around Kay. They've told me they feel uneasy about his temper and the way he's been treating people. It's validating to know I'm not imagining things, but it's also deeply saddening. I don't want to be the reason someone feels ostracized or judged, yet K's actions leave me with little room to defend him. I keep asking myself the same questions, over and over, as if repeating them might bring clarity. Is he just taking everything personally? Is this all a big misunderstanding? Is it even worth trying to mend our friendship when it's gotten this bad? I've always believed that true friends should be able to talk things out, to confront issues head-on rather than letting resentment fester. But Kay hasn't given me that opportunity. Instead of coming to me and saying, "This hurt me," or, "I need space," he's chosen to lash out, to make me the scapegoat for whatever anger or frustration he's carrying. Maybe it's not even about me. Maybe he's dealing with so much stress outside of work that I've become an easy target. I know he has personal struggles, things he hasn't fully shared, and I know he drinks quite a bit, which could be clouding his judgment. But knowing all that doesn't make his behavior any easier to endure. It doesn't erase the disrespect, the stonewalling, or the unkind words he's spoken about me to others. And so, I'm left with this aching sense of loss and confusion. I miss the friendship we had, even if it was never as deep as I once thought. I miss the simplicity of our group hangouts before everything became so complicated. But I also know that I can't keep carrying the emotional burden of someone else's anger, especially when I have so much else to deal with. I want to believe there's a way to fix this, to find closure, but I'm not sure how to get there. Would a better friend have talked to me about their feelings instead of letting them boil over like this? Or is it normal to avoid conflict and let things simmer? I don't know anymore. All I know is that this situation has drained me in ways I didn't think possible. For now, I think I have to step back. As much as I want to be the bigger person, to reach out and try to resolve things, I also have to protect my own peace. Maybe Kay will come around and see things differently. Maybe he won't. Either way, I can't keep pouring energy into something that feels so one-sided. I just hope that someday, he finds whatever it is he's looking for. And I hope that someday, I can look back on this and feel something other than sadness.